Welcome, everyone, to all of our 5 viewers to the second episode of In Search of True North podcast.
Cody, we had 9 viewers on the last one.
I think there were some repeats. I think it was the same 5 people, but they just came back. Like 4 of them came back a second time. I was one of those 5, so.
Yeah.
I watched it 3 times.
So everyone, this is Reed. He's the third wheel on the tricycle. He just wasn't able to be a part of the last podcast. So Reed, Zach and I talked perhaps too long about our reaction to the election. What are your thoughts? What's going on in your world and in your head?
So while I was trying to calibrate all my equipment and get this thing working this evening, I checked on some things that I had heard on the news, and we can talk about which news sources I listened to later. And I watched a video from Awaken with JP. You can find him on YouTube, about how a civil war could start, and he was outlining basically how the media has decided to paint Biden as the official president-elect, which the Biden campaign has absolutely, gone along with. They have office of the president-elect behind Biden anytime they've got him in front of the camera or in front of the public, and then basically saying, hey, this is emotionally true, but factually and legally it's incredibly untrue. There is not a president-elect. And the gist of the video is that could end up being not true, in which case you've got the liberals who are already attached to the idea that that Biden, the president-elect, is real, and then you're going to take him away like you take Santa Claus away from children when you tell them that Santa Claus isn't real, and they're going to riot. And since we've already allowed this behavior in the country, then that's just kind of going to be okay, and that's a possible path towards civil war. I'm still questioning the degree to which I think it's possible for Biden to not actually go ahead and become president, either legitimately or illegitimately. It's just pretty darn likely that either legitimately or illegitimately, that's going to end up being what happens.
Yeah, Reed, I agree with that. And I actually saw an interesting video that Brett Weinstein had, and my mic is like way too loud, where he basically said at this point, the effect that it would have if Donald Trump were to find a way to become president at this point through the legal system, the effect it would have would be so negative that there's not, like, it would outweigh the need to have a fair election, I guess, if that makes sense. Which I thought was an interesting take, because a lot of people would disagree.
Really, what that poses is it better to preserve the country because you're placating the public with the lie that they prefer to hear, and thus a civil war doesn't erupt and we can continue, even though we're continuing under a president that was fraudulently elected? Or is the truth the best path forward, even if knowing the truth sends us into civil war and destroys the country? Does that ring to what you're
Yeah, I think that's
showing?
basically what Brett was going for, is that, those are the two. Either he becomes president Donald Trump finds a way to become president through the legal system and the country riots, or Joe Biden becomes president and it preserves, peace as much as it could possibly preserve. So
I think that civil war is more hyperbolic than what we would see. I think we would absolutely see riots and the sort of we've already between people on, I don't even know what to call them anymore, but I guess in the context of the reality that we're presented, people on the left and people on the right beating the shit out of each other in the streets. But I don't think you can call it a civil war if there's not, if you don't have major, well-funded, organized military groups fighting each other on either side, barring the disintegration of our federal military. I don't think that we'd see a civil war. If anything, we'd see riots, we'd see violence, and whomever claimed final control over the federal government would probably just use the military or the National Guard or bus in cops from other districts to quell the riots. I think that's probably the most that would go on. They might opportunistically use it to establish martial law, but I don't see it devolving into an all-out civil war.
I think civil war is kind of a garbage can term that's thrown at this to basically represent widespread civil unrest, the likes of which we haven't seen since the last Civil War. Usually those things get labeled after the fact. So it could be a rebellion, it could be a revolt, it could be a revolution, it could be a balkanization, it could be an insurrection. But I think when most of us, at least speak for myself, when most of us are referring to civil war, we're talking about widespread, countrywide violence. And obviously that could take a number of different paths.
I think that there are better words to use in civil war for that, though.
Yeah, it's
for sure.
It's civil unrest, right?
Yeah, we don't yet know what it's going to look like and what's going to happen and what that is. So I agree. I think civil war is a really poor term to use. It just happens to be the big flashy word that's being thrown around right now.
Yeah, definitely civil unrest would ensue, no matter how lopsided or one-sided. It could be, if Trump were to find a, it was fraudulent, Trump finds a way to get reelected, there would be a lot of rioting. But would his supporters fight back in a true, civil war, left against right fashion? I'm not too sure they would. They have no reason to,
I mean, even if they tried to, again, like depending on where you get your numbers from, we spend between 700 billion and $1 trillion on the federal military every year, and as long as that group is intact, I don't see the federal government disintegrating in a way that would allow for an all-out civil war or balkanization or anything like that. Like, they've put a lot of money into maintaining the status quo, and I don't think that they're weak enough to let that go yet.
Yeah, so it would have to be a fracturing of the military. So it would have to be like what we see in Venezuela, where there is an established president and then there is an opposition candidate, and then they basically all look to the generals, and the generals decide, well, we're going to recognize this as the legitimate leader. So there's the fissure over who's the legitimate leader, and then orders are delineated down the bureaucracy of the military, and then a branch of the military decides, whoa, we're getting orders from this president. That's the one we recognize. So civil war, like grand, rebellion balkanization would require a fissure in the military.
Yeah,
Like
I
whole
think
units or whole battalions of the military or whole states' National Guard deciding to, go one way versus the other. To jump back to Zach's point of Trump's militia supporters taking action, we've seen a little bit leading up to the election of like armed, we'll call them armed patriots, going to like back the blue and guard stores and cities who are bound for riots and kind of protect those places. And I think that if we saw rioting from the BLM, from the left, from Antifa, from liberals over being told by the media that, wow, Trump is all of a sudden seeming to succeed in stealing the election, or however they choose to pitch it, I think that's the thing that would really instigate any sort of right-wing militia coming into those areas to back up the police and do a vigilante law enforcement / riot control thing. And that's where we would see like some civil violence.
Yeah, that's where the Civil War term, I think, goes for me. I think less in terms of the U.S. military getting involved in a civil war and more of using like the terms left and right and those two groups like going at it. That's kind of what I think. I don't know. I've watched Awaken with JP before, and this guy's hilarious, but I don't know what his video had in mind, but what was in his video, Reed?
That just a note for you guys. I did share that video with you via email. But more specifically, what's your question about that video?
What were his? However, ironically, he brings the point across. What were his kind of points in how it would be, how Civil War could start?
Yeah, the premise of his video is he's painting the picture of how the media and the Biden campaign have absolutely painted this very, very official declaration that Biden is president-elect. And that in truth and legality, he is very much not. And there are currently a number of recounts underway and lawsuits underway, and some credible accusations of voter fraud that may, for all we know, turn the tide of election, and Trump may very well be the legitimate winner. All this time, however, the media has been feeding the public this narrative that Biden is the legitimate winner. And so to undo that, you would have an emotional crisis with all of the liberals that have already accepted the idea that Biden is the president-elect, and however they spin it would make the already left-leaning riot and civil distress just go through the roof.
Yeah.
I basically agree with the point that both of you made earlier, that it does seem less and less likely that Biden doesn't have this in the bag. I guess that was a double negative. I think Biden has this in the bag. There's a handful of journalists that I kind of rely on to kind of sell shit to me straight without much bias one way or another. None of them seem particularly convinced that there was enough fraud enough evidence of fraud to be able to say that the election was stolen from Trump. And even if there was, there is an independent investigative journalist who has proven that there was a substantial amount of election fraud on the part of the Republicans. Leading up to the election, they just quietly kicked hundreds of thousands of voters off the voter rolls, predominantly non-white voters. And then on top of all that, I think if if Trump did have a real chance of pulling this off, I think that the tone of the media coverage from everywhere except like Fox and Breitbart would be something along the lines of, "Oh my God, Big Bad Hitler 2.0 is carrying out a coup d'état. This is insane. Oh my God, what are we going to do? We can't stop him." But instead, the tone that we're seeing from the mainstream media is basically that this big stupid chump won't accept that he lost, and he doesn't have enough sense to exit stage right before he embarrasses himself anymore. So all of that leads me to think that we are probably just going to see Biden take the office in January with probably a low amount of real drama.
Yep.
Yeah. And Cody, to add to that point, what I think is funny is the people who are very concerned that he's not going to leave office. Like if January rolls around and he just squats in the office and just doesn't leave, which I think is funny. It's like they will make it leave. You know, if Biden is
Biden already said that in his election rhetoric, they will force him to leave.
Yeah.
Biden said the military, but the truth is that it will be the Secret Service that moves him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if Biden was able to finish the sentence, you got to give him credit just for that.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, Cody, I think I sent you that video the other day that talked about that, and there was, or maybe a post, I can't remember what it was, but basically someone with a law degree had to explain it to like the Washington Post or something, and I was like, I don't have a law degree, and I know that he's going to get escorted out of the White House if he refuses to leave. I think it's funny the amount of people who kind of buy into that whole thing. It's been the story of his whole presidency, really, the last 4 years. It's like, why are people buying into the things he puts on Twitter that make no sense?
He played into it too, I think, just to get a rise out of people. Like he made some comment at some point about how, you know, maybe he could run for a third term or like Trump forever or whatever. But like he's clearly just being an ass just for the sake of being an ass.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm an idiot, but I don't see anything clear about it. I'm still trying to figure out whether Trump is a genius or he's mentally ill. Maybe both.
I think it's some combination of both, Reed.
Yeah, I'm pretty firm that he's not an idiot. Like when I said it, he was being an ass. I mean in almost a sort of calculated way. I think he was aware very early on that he can say almost anything he wants, and none of his followers take any of the ridiculous things he says seriously. They all just roll his eyes and say, "Oh, that's just Trump." But everyone on the left is, "Oh my God." Like we elected a megalomaniacal the fascist Hitler person, and so the disconnect just gets even greater then between the left and the right.
Yeah, it seems like a good portion of people who voted for Trump in 2020 are either completely blind and deaf to anything critical said about him, or are something along the lines of, well, I just wish he wouldn't tweet so much.
I've heard that same thing so many times. People, like all the Trump supporters that I know in my life, almost invariably say, you know, I wish he'd put the phone down, but you know, I like his policies.
Yeah,
Those aren't the diehards, though. Those aren't the core Trumpers.
The diehards love it. They love the insane tweets and the whole theater of it all. And I think it's funny.
They're the ones chanting "lock her up," and you know, they're the ones that are all for, you know, trying all the Democrats in Congress for treason.
Has that really been a talking point on the right?
it's just something that Trump will spout off at one of his rallies that gets his base all fired up. That's absolutely baseless and doesn't make any sense. But it's real popular with his base.
I think that there's strong grounds to try most people in Congress for treason, but not. I think singling out the Democrats seems unfair.
I was just thinking that could.
Yeah. So it was specifically that just to bring all that back to a specific event. After the State of the Union address, when I think he was talking about something that he exclaimed that he had achieved, and some of the Democrats booed while all of the Republicans were cheering and standing and applauding. And he pointed that out during this rally, and then he said, "Is it treason? Why not? Why not? Sure, that's treason." And everyone went crazy. They were like, yeah. And it's like, okay, but that's not treason. It's not even new.
I don't think he thinks it is, though. Like, I think, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure some of the people in the audience might be that crazy. I mean, there are crazy people on both sides. But Trump says obnoxious, over-the-top shit like that all the time. And it's I don't know. It's more explicitly performative theater than what you ordinarily see from a politician.
Yeah.
But I still think that's all
30% of the country absolutely eats it up.
Wait, what was that percentage?
30.
That is way too fucking high.
Okay, so what percentage of the country is Trump's hardline base? The people. Okay, so to qualify this, the percentage of the country that would say, nope, Trump's fine by me, after witnessing Trump shoot somebody in Washington, D.C. Because what was that comment that Trump made? He said, I could shoot somebody on Pennsylvania Avenue.
He did say that.
And I'd still be president. And so the percentage of the country that witnessed him shoot somebody on Pennsylvania Avenue and still thinks he's a great guy and still thinks he should be president, that percentage, which is Trump's core,
I would say
not
no.
Everybody that voted for him in 2020.
No more than 10%. You have to remember there's 330 million people in this country. So when you start saying 30%, you're talking about 100 million people. Like, there's no way. I'll give you 10%, maybe 30 million.
But I think it's lower than 30% for sure. And I think those people would find themselves, if he did actually shoot someone, he does things like dropping bombs in the Middle East and that no one hears about. But if he did actually do a visible crime of shooting someone on Pennsylvania Avenue, I would hope people would drop the support there. But
it would probably depend on who he shot, which I don't say. I don't think that's cool.
Limbaugh would come out and say that it was totally justified and that it was self-defense, and Limbaugh would uncover some crazy allegation about how the person that he shot fucking deserved it, and 30% of the country would be like, yeah, good. It's about time the president shot somebody.
Dude.
Finally, America is great again, where the president can just shoot somebody who deserves it.
Only 20% of the country even voted for him. Like, if 30% of the country is this hardline base that doesn't give a shit what he does, he could shoot somebody in the face on Pennsylvania Avenue and they would still support him. Why didn't that 90 to 100 million people come out to vote for him? Like, 30% is way too high. I mean, this is a trivial point, but like, I think.
Yeah, we're getting off the deep end into what percentage of the country votes and what percentage of the country supports.
Well, no, but I think rhetoric matters, and I think some of. Well, it's funny because I was just giving Donald Trump a pass because I'm just like, well, I mean, I think it's performative theater, but I don't know. I think if you're somebody who's earnest and who's trying to make sense of all this, I think you have to be a little more intentional and responsible in your rhetoric. And I think there is this idea that, well, the Trumpers out there, and it's like, okay, yeah, there are crazy Trump supporters, but I've met just as many. Actually, no, I've met more crazy Obama supporters where you can point out, like, fact after fact, like human rights violations that this guy committed. And their eyes just glaze over because they have no interest in hearing about it. And most of the time, they just assume that, well, you're a racist or you're an Obama hater. So I don't know. I think it's reckless to overstate the size of the fanatic base on either side, left or right. I think that's hyperbolic, but I think it tends to happen a lot more often, at least in the circles that I'm a little more familiar with. People more recklessly caricature the right, how fanatic it is, and how big the fanatic sect of the right is.
Okay,
Well,
you bring up.
okay. If you break it down to a third of the country is hardline or hardline right, and a third of the country is hardline left, and a third of the country is somewhere in the middle, regardless of which percentage of the entire country votes. I don't think that's entirely unreasonable. The one thing, and I see your point, and I'm sure it's somewhat overstated. One of the observations, though, that makes me think that there is a larger than we all think core of Trump supporters that are absolutely faithful and loyal to him no matter what, is his approval ratings throughout his presidency. Obama had the support of the mainstream media, and if you only listen to mainstream media, his presidency was just this glowing, constant victory. Trump's presidency, if you listen to the mainstream media, was just this bumbling, exploding, tumbled down a concrete staircase of disaster. And yet, despite that, his approval ratings never dipped down, what was it, 38, 40% approval? Like he just had this bedrock plateau of approval, no matter how bad it got. No matter what awful thing came out through the mainstream media about what he was doing, or some crap he said about shithole country this or grabbing pussy that. He just had this hard rock bottom of support, and no matter if he went out and had a rally during those times, he could still gather a huge crowd and have all these people cheering for him. And then you have the liberals taking snippets of those rallies, and the liberals are going, "Oh my God, how could anybody like this guy?" And yet there's a stadium of people cheering him on.
Yeah, the stadium's full of people, Reed, is what I immediately thought of when I thought of, the 30% number that you threw out there that may or may not be correct, but is he fills these gigantic, seemingly it could just be camera tricks, but huge stadiums of fans, I guess, if you want to call them that. And if you took that as his core and use that as your percentage number, then it would be fairly high. I mean, it's seemingly a pretty large number.
The point that you made about approval ratings is flip-flopped, Reed. You can go look all this stuff up at Gallup.com. If you just scroll through the years, Trump's approval ratings, they have it like month by month throughout all 4 years of his presidency, and then open up right next to it, approval ratings by month for Barack Obama. The floor is lower for Trump, and the ceiling is higher for Obama. And the average, just scrolling through the numbers, it's very clear to see that Obama had, on average, a higher approval rating per Gallup.
Right. But the thing is given the media, the mainstream media reporting of the presidency during the time. Right?
I think that has less to do with Trump fanaticism, though, and more to do with general distrust of the media.
Well, I don't think there's general distrust of the media amongst Obama supporters. Period.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you're saying the fact that President Trump's approval ratings aren't as awful as because Donald Trump's approval ratings aren't as awful as you would expect based on how the mainstream media reports on his presidency. I think that is because I think that has less to do with fanaticism for Donald Trump, is what I'm saying, and more to do with, I mean, maybe 10% or maybe even half of that approval rating comes from, he's our guy if he shoots somebody or not. But like, I think a lot of it, there's, especially on the right, a growing suspicion of the mainstream media. Well, maybe not as much of Fox, but everyone, pretty much all the other mainstream sources.
This is getting pretty like close to the edge of the speculatory diving board, so I think we should rein it in. But the other and the other thing too is this is the great mystery of American politics, current events of our culture, because now we've had 2 elections where most of the polling has gotten it wrong and just seen that, Hillary's going to win and Biden's going to win. And then, whoo, look at this turnout for Trump, and whoo, look at this turnout for Trump again. I mean, even though the media is saying that Biden won, the media is still like, the polling industry is in trouble because we didn't see it getting this close. So this really is a good topic for our viewers and comments, and that should be something that this topic of what is the Trump base, how elusive is it, how steadfast is it, how widespread is it? That I think that's a great topic for comments and whatnot, and obviously we're just continuing to kind of grasp at it, and I don't have any hard evidence to pull into this anymore. I propose we change the subject to coronavirus.
What about coronavirus, Reed?
This is I'm not saying this because I endorse it, but I thought it was. There's a dude on YouTube who, because the coronavirus has about 5% of its genome is analogous to HIV, an attempt to sardonically draw attention to that, he started calling it COVIDs, which is crass. But I thought it was funny.
COVIDs. I'm gonna start using that with people that I disagree with, but don't have the courage to admit it. COVIDs.
Godspeed.
So the reason I thought of coronavirus as a decent topic for this evening was today. One of the big popular news stories is that in the last month, and people can argue with the numbers and the sources and whatever, and frankly, I don't care. And if there's any Trump supporters who are like, these numbers can't be trusted, well, okay, it's Trump deciding who the hospitals report to and what these numbers are, and that's all factoring into his warp speed thing. So whatever. These are mainstream, widely accepted coronavirus numbers, and it doesn't matter what you believe. But the big mainstream story about coronavirus numbers in the U.S. today was that we are now at 11 million cases in the United States, and this last million, the jump from 10 million to 11 million, happened in the last month. So the curve in the United States, has been climbing, and now we're in this spike where we just did 10% of all of the cases since March, February, in the last month.
Reed, I want to clarify there. Is this the number of new cases? Because when you say it's been climbing up and up and up, what I've noticed generally, what is reported is just like in, for example, in Charlotte, they were just showing the number of cases like day by day, and I'm like, yeah, it's going to increase because they're like compounding on each other. I guess I thought it was interesting. It's like if you are you specifically talking about number of new cases?
So this is total cases, and that's a great point because that is so often. So specifically, the news that I just represented is that right now in the United States, the total number of cases is 11.2 million. And 10 million of those cases were recorded before a month ago. Okay, so in the last month, there have been 1 million cases in the United States.
Is there any indication about I haven't been following it, to be perfectly honest, but have you seen any indication of how much of that is the virus spiking and its spread again, or how much of it is because of testing?
No idea. And frankly, I don't think any of us have a good idea of where that is delineated.
Yeah. What's your take on it? Like what's your reaction to it?
Well, I think that we're going to see a lot more. Really, the narrative that's kind of qualifying that figure, that statistical figure, is that it's out of hand and it's out of control, and we're heading into winter, which means that people are going to be gathering for the holidays with extended family. They're going to be leaving
having
school
weddings without masks. How dare they?
Look, that was outside, bruh. Anyway, people are going to be leaving school, going home, so traveling across state lines, gathering indoors. There's not much stuff going on outside if it's winter, so there's going to be more indoor stuff. The other thing too is the virus lives longer in refrigerated environments, and we've lost control of it. So we're going to see more politicians, either rightfully so or wrongfully so, coming out with lockdowns and restrictions. It just happened in Michigan, effective on Wednesday. Here in Michigan, we're going back to closing all the gyms, closing all the restaurants. All of high school is going to be remote.
Your mic is doing weird things. It's getting kind of.
Reed's mic is doing weird things.
Yeah, it's
Reed. Your internet's a little. I can still hear you, but
I've been able to follow everything you're saying. It's getting kind of sketchy.
Okay, is the problem still going on right now?
That's much better.
That's better.
Oh, good. Yeah. So my, and we're already seeing little bits of, this Biden cabinet expert, blah, 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 suggests that the nation go into a 4-week lockdown. Obviously, that won't happen until the Biden administration takes office, but we're already being prepped for that. Just like the Biden campaign came out and said, if Trump refuses to leave the White House, the military will remove him from the White House. Now, a couple months before inauguration, we're being fed, hey, we could go into national lockdown for a month. It's just preparing us for that idea. So who knows? Maybe after Biden takes office and it's still this bad or worse, they may say, hey, 2-week national lockdown. And then we'll go, oh, good, at least it's not a month. And of course, 2 weeks would grow into a month or whatever. And it's definitely going to affect all of our lives, whether it's real or an exploited crisis for political or corporate gain, it doesn't matter. This is all going to be stuff that we continue to have to deal with.
I saw in an interview recently, Alan Dershowitz, who is a very, very prominent lawyer who perhaps most famously represented Jeffrey Epstein. And he was a professor.
He defended Trump in the impeachment hearings.
Oh, did he? Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. He in an interview claimed, I wish I knew how to like play videos and the thing. It was incredible. He said, "You do not have." I'm going to try to paraphrase it as closely as I can. He said, "You do not have a constitutional right to endanger your fellow citizens by not getting vaccinated."
Who?
Right?
Wait, Dershowitz said that?
Yes, he did.
I'm done with this guy. When he was defending Trump in the impeachment hearing, he said Trump has the legal right to do, or Trump's job is to make decisions that are best for the country, and a president obviously thinks that his reelection is in the best interest of the country, and so anything he does to support his reelection is justified because, from his perspective, it's in the best interest for the country.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Cody, so basically what he's saying is if you don't get vaccinated, you're an asshole. Is that what he's saying?
Oh, no. He's saying more than that. It was funny too because like the journalist in the video was like nodding along kind of agreeably, and then like when it registered in his brain what Dershowitz had just said, he said, "Hold on, wait, can we back up a sec?" And he repeated the point to ask Dershowitz to verify that that's what he meant. And Dershowitz said, "No, yeah, like the government absolutely has the right to force you to take the vaccine, and if you refuse, they have the right to send the police in to bring you forcibly to a hospital." And I think the terminology he used was stick a needle in your arm. And this is one of the
problematic.
One of the most famous and successful lawyers in our country who's taught law, and I don't remember if it was Stanford. It was one of those Ivy League schools for like I think like 20 or 30 years.
Republicans are a really big fan of him.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which is odd because he seems to be quite the pro-dictatorial political advocate.
The one cool thing he did is he provided some amount of support for Julian Assange's legal team. I think like in 2011 or something like that. But like everything else, it was like participated in Harvey Weinstein's defense. You know, the Epstein thing, etc. It was just like a list of like, oh, really? Why'd you do that?
You know, it's just sad that we spend so much energy discussing whether or not it's okay to forcibly vaccinate people, because really the conversation that should be taking that attention is how it's absolutely essential that we determine the citizens in this country that aren't fit to reproduce and forcing them to be sterilized.
You know, I don't think I could have said it better myself.
Something this country used to do back when it was great.
Something I saw that was interesting was we should give the vaccine to all the politicians first. And if it kills all of them, then America is safe. And if it works, then we know that the people are safe. So
yeah,
it's a win-win.
Yeah.
It should be mandatory for politicians first. Absolutely agree.
It should be. If you're going to come knock on my door and break down my door to come make me take it, then you better have taken it already. So.
But to the broader point, it is interesting because part of me, part of me was thinking that if Biden wins, he'll do some ostensibly tough measures like right away, and then very quickly call victory on the disease, which seems pretty plausible to me. But then on the other hand, I do think that this virus has the potential to be a golden goose for the surveillance state, for the FBI, for Homeland Security, like you name it. I mean, fuck. Yeah. And I mean, I've heard people talking about, I might have heard this from you, Reed, people talking about passing a work from home tax, because there's so many people who are out of jobs. So the people who can work from home should chip in to help those people. And it's like, wait, you just funneled trillions of dollars upstream to the wealthiest people on the planet. But all of us middle class people working from home, like, yeah, we need to chip in. Okay.
Yeah, let's tax them more. Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I'm curious to see how it plays out, whether it's going to be basically sweep it under the rug real quick and be like, oh, hey, Biden saved us all, or if it's going to be
a mission accomplished banner on an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, exactly. Or if it's going to be something that draws out much longer, because
it'll be both.
Well,
Bush did it. He did the mission accomplished banner on the aircraft carrier, and that was for the Iraq War.
That was like right after it started, yeah.
It was like a month in.
Yeah, but they could sweep it under the rug pretty quickly if they wanted to. Like, not to dive into conspiracy theories or anything, but like Fauci himself has admitted that the test isn't reliable. I don't entirely understand biologically how it works, but there's a threshold that has to be set for the test sensitivity from like 0 to 100. And if you set it at 0, nobody has it. If you set it at 100, everybody has it. And they've just kind of ballparked around 30. So false positives, you probably get negatives. And also they're financially incentivizing hospital workers at every level to ramp up COVID cases or reported COVID cases. To what extent that draws into question the totals that are being reported, I don't know. I do think obviously COVID is a real disease that's really affecting people.
Yeah.
But it does.
Regardless, at the end of the day, it is advantageous for anybody who wants to exploit the pandemic to cast doubt in general. When in question, cast doubt, and it will make this easier to exploit.
Wait, what do you mean?
Make it so that people don't trust the tests. Make it so that people don't trust whether or not masks help. Make it so that people don't trust the results of the election. The more doubt there is in whether or not this whole thing is real, and the more chaos there is, the more justification you have for implementing stronger measures of control.
Okay, yeah, I'd get behind that.
Yeah, Reed, I agree, and I think it's that goes back to what Cody and I always talk about, which is the kind of the theatrics of it all. It's the two sides working together, and we're not a part of their club. So, like, at the governmental level, they're working together to create doubt on like either side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
Yeah. That's probably where I got the quote. Because,
Yeah, and really, and perhaps this should be the topic of our next podcast, because I'm getting to the point where I need to sign off. But really, that's it. Is from both narratives, from the narrative of, oh, the election was absolutely secure and Biden is president-elect, and the narrative of Trump is our man and he's draining the swamp and we're getting rid of all of this deep state control, even though they've got you out supporting this party that has unmarked federal vans sweeping up protesters off the streets, and people like Dershowitz who are saying that it's totally okay to require that people get vaccinated. Both sides are playing and dividing this whole thing. And both sides feel like they're the righteous party, and both sides are accusing the other of being fake news. And so the battle of the two narratives, I think, is something that really needs to get talked about on both sides.
For sure. Yeah. And that's what they want. They got us right where they want them. And I don't see, it does need to be talked about. I think that's kind of how you start to fix it, but I don't see it getting fixed anytime soon. Unfortunately, slightly pessimistic end note there, but hopefully with podcasts like ours, it helps people start to talk about it and start to think critically. And if you watch other people's podcasts that like Jimmy Dore. I mean, Jimmy Dore is extremely progressive and wants socialized healthcare. And then you'll see like someone who's like, "Hey, I'm a Republican and I agree with this guy." So I've already watched a bunch of independent journalists, and I know Cody has too. See some agreement on both sides, and I think that's great progress. We just need to keep it going, right?
I think that that's the most dangerous secret to the elite, that the people on the left and the people on the right, if that's what we call them, that they actually have a lot more in common than they know, especially when you get to the fringes. The people, when you get to, because there's a kind of cool like prepper anarchist segment of the far right, and then there's kind of a very, very similar, and sometimes aside from the cultural baggage, and if you just look at the habits, behaviors, and ideas, an almost identical sect on the left, and even moving inward towards the center, there's more similarities than there are differences. Most people oppose corporate welfare. Most people, apparently, according to a recent Fox News exit poll during the election, like over 70% of people favor universal healthcare. There's so much more that we agree on than we disagree on, yet you have people beating the shit out of each other in the streets.
Yep. And you have the police in the middle, keeping them separated and very physically keeping them divided. Yep. Yeah. One
thing that I've heard that I'm curious if you guys have seen or heard anything that corroborates this, and I've heard this from I've heard this from many sources, and most recently I read about it in Noam Chomsky's book Manufacturing Consent, when Chomsky was talking about the 1990 World Trade Organization protests in Seattle. He said that one of the things that was really interesting is that the cops did almost nothing to stop people from rioting and looting. They didn't actually do anything to try to stop violent protesters. They mostly antagonized peaceful protesters and arrested peaceful protesters. Is that something that either of you guys have seen in videos or anything like, or heard about, or I don't know, like, what do you guys think of that?
I'm seeing that play out across the country, all over the place, and depending on the narrative that you listen to, you either get a narrative that the police were just absolutely overwhelmed and could not quell the riots, and they just needed to like retreat their perimeter, and it was just too big to handle, or the narrative of they were enabling it and inciting it and showing up to peaceful protests wearing all this riot gear, and the protests are going, why are you in riot gear? Some protest videos show the protests sitting down chanting at the cops, why are you in riot gear? Why are you in riot gear? And then depending on which narrative you get the armed patriot militias showing up to back up the cops, and that's where you get these really violent clashes, and you get the Kyle Rittenhouse situation and all of that.
That blew my mind.
I've seen all of that drama playing out big time over the whole stuff leading up to the election.
Yeah, Cody. I had a point, but I kind of lost it.
That's
but
happened to me a
yeah,
few times this talk too.
yeah. I think the BLM protests. If, just to touch on that for just a second, I think those are interesting because a lot of it, not to get conspiratorial, but I think a lot of it was, as you quote unquote, hijacked. I think there was a lot of people there that were, like you saw in some cities, people would literally put a stack of bricks like next to a building. Like,
Did we see the same video?
we might have
Was
seen
that Jimmy
video.
Dore? Yeah, because I saw the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen several videos on these protests where basically it was all peaceful, and they basically either antagonized them into riots, or there were outside people who claimed to be Antifa who came in and, in the name of Antifa, would throw bricks through a building, and so that whole movement was really sort of hijacked by an unknown source, I guess. We can speculate if we wanted to, but
I
we don't have to speculate on some of that because the Pentagon Papers revealed that government operatives did that intentionally during riots during the Vietnam War. So
Yeah,
we know the government has
COINTELPRO
done it in
and
the
the
past.
agent
We know they're
provocateurs.
capable of doing it. We can assume that they do it periodically or regularly. And then from personal experience, knowing people who routinely go to protest and wear black and red and identify as Antifa, there is certainly a mentality of this needs to be violent in order to get attention. So Antifa does exist as far as an ideology. They do show up. They do turn up the heat. And whether there are government actors contributing to that or using that or posing as that in order to do it when they want to, when they need to, or whether it's organic, it doesn't matter. The point is that it does happen. Mm-hmm. And with that, guys, I do need to sign out. So if you guys want to keep going, I think that's cool. Cody, is it cool with you if I just hit the red button?
I think I'm good with ending it as I kind of like us.
We can just close.
Starting as a group.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. I had a really good time. I thought this was a great talk.
Yeah, and I think good topics for next time could be more about BLM and Antifa and going into more into the civil unrest thing, and then I would love to talk too about BLM in detail with the specific cases, the Jacob Blake issue, and how it ties into how the politics have brought that into the narrative around the election. That would be a good topic too.
Yeah, I think those are some issues that aren't going away with this, with Biden taking office potentially. So those are great. Yeah, for sure.
I haven't followed the incidents that caused protests this year super closely. I'm pretty familiar with George Floyd, and I'm relatively familiar with Breonna Taylor. Any others that you want to talk about? Can you just send us like a list, and then we can go and find out shit about that?
Yeah, and in general too, I think it's good that that all three of us aren't only looking at the same thing. So that's a wonderful thing about these discussions is I happen to know quite a bit about the Jacob Blake incident, and if you know a lot about George Floyd, then we bring those to the table, and I'm like, so and so compared this to George Floyd, and I don't think that's a fair comparison. And you may be like, oh, well, but there's this about George Floyd, and therefore it may very well be a fair comparison. So I think that's a great reason to do these podcasts.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we all have at least a little bit of background knowledge about each of them, so that we can contribute a little bit.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I had a great time. Everyone, thanks for listening, and tune in next time for In Search of True North, Episode 3.